The miracle at Dunkirk when Britain stared into the abyss. The destroyer HMS Grafton was sinking. German torpedoes had ripped through her hull, and as she listed violently in the dark waters of Dunkirk, Captain Charles Robinson made a decision that would haunt him forever. He left hundreds of French soldiers behind, trapped below deck, their screams echoing across the water as the ship went down. It was May 29, 1940, and this was just one tragedy among thousands unfolding on the beaches of northern France, where the entire British army was about to be annihilated. Or so Hitler believed. What happened next would defy every military calculation, every strategic prediction, and every logical outcome. Against impossible odds, 338,226 Allied soldiers would escape across the English Channel in what Winston Churchill called a miracle of deliverance. But here's what the history books often miss. Dunkirk wasn't just miraculous, it was bizarre, controversial, and built on a foundation of catastrophic mistakes that somehow transformed into Britain's finest hour. The trap snaps shut. 6 weeks earlier, Nazi Germany had unleashed Fall-Gelb-Case Yellow, an audacious plan to punch through the impassable Ardennes forest and race to the English Channel. The French and British High Command had been certain the main German attack would come through Belgium. Just like World War I, they were catastrophically wrong. German panzer divisions, led by generals like Heinz Guderian and Erwin Rommel, smashed through French defenses with a speed that shocked even Hitler himself. By May 20th, German tanks had reached the Channel coast at Abbeville, slicing the Allied armies in two like a guillotine blade. The British Expeditionary Force, along with French and Belgian troops, found themselves in a rapidly shrinking pocket with their backs to the sea. Lord Gort, commander of the British forces, faced an impossible situation. His supply lines were cut. The French army was collapsing around him, and the Royal Air Force was fighting desperately over his head, while the Luftwaffe owned the skies. Military theory was clear: encircled armies get destroyed. The BEAF should have been annihilated, its 200,000 soldiers killed or captured, Britain left defenseless against invasion. But then something inexplicable happened. Hitler's halt order, history's most controversial pause on May 24th. With German tanks just 15 miles from Dunkirk and nothing substantial standing between them and complete victory, Adolf Hitler issued the infamous Hochbefehl, the halt order. The panzers were to stop their advance for 72 crucial hours. Historians still argue about why. Some say Hitler wanted to preserve his tanks for the conquest of France. Others claim his generals convinced him the marshy Flanders terrain was unsuitable for armor. Gring, head of the Luftwaffe, allegedly boasted his air force alone could finish off the trapped British. The most intriguing theory suggests Hitler harbored a strange respect for Britain and hoped a negotiated peace was still possible. That deliberately allowing the British to escape might make them more amenable to terms. Whatever the reason, those 3 days were golden. The British and French forces fell back into a defensive perimeter around Dunkirk, 7 divisions forming a thin line that somehow held. And in London, the Royal Navy began planning what they codenamed Operation Dynamo, the most desperate evacuation in military history. Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay, working from a dynamo room in the cliffs of Dover, hence the operation's name, faced a nightmare scenario. Dunkirk's harbour had been bombed into uselessness. The beaches were wide, shallow, and exposed. Large destroyers couldn't get close to shore, and German artillery was already ranging in, while the Luftwaffe prepared to turn the beaches into a killing ground. Ramsay estimated he might save 45,000 men over 2 days before the position collapsed completely. The rest would be lost. He was off by nearly 300,000. The little ships, myth and reality collide. Here's where the story gets truly extraordinary, and where myth and reality blur into something stranger than fiction. Ramsay's staff made a revolutionary decision. If the big ships couldn't reach the beaches, they'd send everything that could. A call went out across southeastern England for any vessel capable of crossing the Channel. What responded became legendary: the little ships of Dunkirk. Fishing boats and pleasure yachts, Thames barges and lifeboats, a fireboat from London, paddle steamers that normally carried holidaymakers around piers. One vessel was 14 feet long, barely more than a rowboat. The Tamzine, a cockleboat, made 7 trips. The paddle steamer Medway Queen rescued 7,000 men while shooting down 3 German aircraft. But here's what often gets romanticized. Many of these civilian vessels were crewed by Royal Navy personnel, not their civilian owners. The myth of thousands of weekend sailors spontaneously sailing into hell isn't quite accurate. What is accurate is that hundreds of civilians did volunteer, that their vessels were essential, and that they faced the same bombs, torpedoes, and machine gun fire as any soldier. The civilian steamer Crested Eagle was hit by German bombers and burst into flames. Passengers who'd been rescued burned alive or drowned. The destroyer HMS Wakeful was torpedoed with 640 soldiers aboard. Only 1 lifeboat survived. In the confusion and darkness, another British destroyer accidentally rammed and sank a British minesweeper, mistaking it for a U-boat. The waters off Dunkirk became a graveyard. 9 days in hell. From May 26 to June 4, 1940, an entire army balanced on a knife's edge while the world held its breath. On the beaches, soldiers queued in orderly lines, stretching into the surf-sitting ducks for German Stukas that screamed down in near-vertical dives. Men waded chest-deep into the cold water, waiting hours for a boat that might never come. Some drowned from exhaustion, others were machine-gunned where they stood. The Luftwaffe dropped thousands of bombs daily, yet the soft sand absorbed much of their explosive force. Men survived blasts that should have killed them, while shrapnel cut down others yards away. German artillery pounded the perimeter relentlessly. The town of Dunkirk burned so fiercely its smoke column could be seen from Dover, and still the ships kept coming. The Royal Air Force, outnumbered, but fighting with desperate courage, engaged in aerial battles that prevented the Luftwaffe from achieving total domination. RAF pilots flew until their planes fell apart or their fuel ran dry, then flew again. The soldiers on the beaches, unable to see most of these air battles happening miles away, believed they'd been abandoned, creating a rift between army and air force that would last for years. Meanwhile, French and Belgian troops held the perimeter in brutal rearguard actions that rarely make the history books. The 12th Infantry Division at Lille held off 7 German divisions for 4 days, allowing the evacuation to continue. They fought until their ammunition was gone, then surrendered, having saved thousands of lives through their sacrifice. The numbers that defy belief. By the morning of June 4th, when the last ships departed under heavy fire, the impossible had occurred. Over 338,000 Allied soldiers had been evacuated, roughly 140,000 of them French, Belgian, and other Allied troops alongside the British. The cost was sobering. 6 British and 3 French destroyers sunk, over 200 ships lost, roughly 68,000 British casualties. All of the BEF's heavy equipment, tanks, artillery, vehicles abandoned on the beaches. Every rifle, every round of ammunition, every supply dump captured by Germany. Churchill himself addressed Parliament on June 4th with words that defined British defiance. "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." But he also warned that wars are not won by evacuations. He was right. Dunkirk was a defeat, a catastrophic military disaster dressed up as a victory. Yet it saved Britain from annihilation. The alternate history that almost was. Here's the chilling counterfactual. If Dunkirk had failed, Britain would have lost its entire professional army. The nation would have been defenseless, its trained soldiers gone, its equipment captured. Hitler's planned invasion Operation Sea Lion might have succeeded. The war could have ended in 1940 with German victory. Instead, those rescued soldiers formed the nucleus of Britain's defense during the Battle of Britain, then the reconstituted armies that would eventually fight in North Africa, Italy, and on D-Day. Many of the officers rescued at Dunkirk would become the generals who liberated Europe. Why it still matters. The Dunkirk evacuation endures in memory, not because it was a military triumph. It wasn't, but because it revealed something profound about human resilience and collective will. An army, trapped and seemingly doomed, somehow escaped because thousands of people, military and civilian, refused to accept the inevitable. Was it a miracle? Perhaps. Or perhaps it was something more instructive. Proof that when catastrophe strikes, When all logic points toward disaster, human courage and improvisation can occasionally bend the arc of history. The waters of Dunkirk are quiet now. The beaches where men queued under fire are peaceful. But walk them today, and you re-walking through a graveyard and a birthplace simultaneously, where an army died and Britain's resistance was born, where the tide of World War II first hesitated before its long, brutal turn.